We are Bragg, makers of the apple cider vinegar with the big yellow label, now in capsule form, with even more benefits. So you can put it in your pocket, put it in your jeans' tiny pocket, take it with your morning oats for your health, go bull riding with it, go to the moon with it. Pretend it's a magical pill that helps support immunity. It has zinc and vitamin D, so it does. Carry it in your purse. Carry it through airport security. Take that, TSA. It's Bragg apple cider vinegar, now in capsule form. Bragg, it's not weird if it works.
So you've found the perfect home, but high mortgage rates have you second-guessing. The Churchill Mortgage team says waiting to buy can be a costly mistake. Try their free 15-minute analysis to see the difference between buying now versus waiting for lower rates. Visit churchillmortgage.com to learn a smarter way to build wealth through home ownership. This is a paid advertisement. NMLS ID 1591. NMLSconsumeraccess.org. Equal housing lender. 1749 Mallory Lane, Suite 100, Brentwood, Tennessee 37027.
Okay, everybody, we are back. We apologize. We have all this fancy audio equipment that I don't know how to use. Fruit Loop definitely knows how to use it, but either our internet connection was not as good as it should be. Where we were doing the new podcast was in a totally different part of the house and not even remotely close to the Wi-Fi. So we're not sure if that was the problem or... I mean, it could have been something as stupid as me hitting mute. So anyways, we are back, and we deleted the last podcast that we had just because it was broken. So real quick, we'll just talk about what we had mentioned before we went live, and we were just talking about, obviously, last week, Chad Daybell was arrested for human remains being found on his property, and just a few days ago, law enforcement confirmed that those remains were of J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan. So then we talked about our feelings about covering cases and how you get attached to people and how that happens really, quickly. You start to care about these people and you don't even know them. So we're just going to pick up where we left off, and we were talking about how did they come to find this small piece of land on, 3 acres? To search. Was it good old-fashioned detective work with drones or satellites and things like that, or did somebody talk?
Yeah, and we discussed it's a combination of a lot of things, I think. We had sources to say that, FBI can go in and look at ground and what something looked like the day before and what it looked like, that day. So just a combination of a lot of things, I think, helped in that aspect.
Yeah, so we'll find out eventually. But and the other thing that we were going to talk about right before everything went south was what's next. And so I think the thing that we're waiting on now, obviously, is a cause of death. That's going to tell a lot. Obviously, you can gather this was not a natural death. The remains were hitting on property. So we anticipate it's going to be a murder, homicide. And from there, we wait and see if they upgrade charges on Chad.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting to see where that goes and how they play all this out.
Right. And so another thing we had mentioned in the last podcast, we deleted that, but one thing I did want to say was that I was saying that my friend Kathy Russin, who is the co-founder of Law and Crime Network, has been in Rexburg since the day after the bodies were found, and a source told her that Chad sat and watched the law enforcement agencies that were there on the property start to work. And when they hit the first set of remains, apparently that is when Chad sped off, and as we know, cops came up behind him and took him into custody. So one of the theories that we were talking about was, is this a situation where maybe people online think that Chad could have been the one to say the remains were on his property, but I don't know. What do you feel about that, Fruit Loop?
I don't see it. It just doesn't, for me, it doesn't make sense. And I just think it's weird that he sat and watched. Exactly.
So how can they do that?
Yeah, they have the means to look day by day at any area they want to look at through a satellite.
Which would be interesting because, as we know, Idaho is cold in the winter, and the ground stays pretty frozen most of the winter. So I would assume this time of year is when things are unthawed and the ground starts settling. So we noticed in the overhead shot of the property before they really started digging good that the area they were in, it was the square that they dug up, essentially was depressed in the ground. So could it be that somebody talked? Maybe. Or could it be that the law enforcement agencies just started looking at changes to the property along with any kind of tip?
Exactly. And you also throw in the cadaver dog.
Right. They did have a cadaver dog there. And those dogs are amazing. They can smell death from a mile away. But at the same time, in order to get these search warrants, you have to go before a judge and have really solid evidence. And you have to tell them specifically where you're going on that property and what you expect to find. And this is how we know that stuff is there. So it kind of makes me think there could be an informant.
Yeah. And you think the police and the FBI, they don't want to blow this case.
Right.
They're not going to go with just a little bit of evidence or anything. They're going to have, a pretty good, solid reason and be able to go in and get that search warrant.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see. But when they do these, where it's sealed, it's a risk to a person or persons who may have talked. And also, one of the other reasons they will seal a search warrant is if maybe they got their information through wiretapping and they're not finished wiretapping. So maybe if Chad was talking to somebody, they still have that person wiretapped. We just don't know. But it's actually, I think it's kind of hard to get those kind of things sealed. So it must be a pretty big thing that they don't want out there right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's very important. And, we'll know when it goes to court, but until then, we're just going to continue to speculate on, what it was.
Yeah, and one thing we mentioned, too, before we had the technical difficulties is we are okay with speculating. That's kind of what you have to do when you follow trials and the information isn't readily available. You have to sort of put two and two together and come up with your own theories. And we do that, but what we said we were not going to do is take internet rumors about things and pass them off. We just really want to make sure that what we put out there is something that is proven. I will use Kathy Russin, like I said before. I've worked with her on the Jodi Arias case, and I trust anything that she puts out there. So if I have a source like that, or not, she's not my source. If I see that she has reported on something, I definitely have no qualms about passing that on here.
Exactly. And as we continue to build our website and everything, we're going to have stuff on there where you can go click and look at links that we talk about and videos we talk about to help you kind of stay informed of what's going on.
Yeah. And so the big news today, we didn't think we would really have anything new today to talk about, but Chad Daybell just this afternoon, through his lawyer, pled not guilty to the charges that he is currently facing. And what did you think about that?
I think we talked about it, and we weren't shocked.
No, not shocked at all. Here's the thing. For him to plead guilty right now, I mean, he would have a very hard time when they upgrade the charges, which I expect they will. If you plead guilty to this, then, it's kind of hard to prove that you're not guilty of the next charge. I just don't see it happening. What do you think personality-wise? I mean, do you think Chad Daybell would ever just plead guilty?
Everything he does is just out in left field. I don't know mentally what he's thinking, and honestly, I don't know.
Yeah.
And you look at what the stuff he waived, right?
I don't know if he waived the preliminary. We aren't sure yet. They did say that they wanted a pretrial hearing, but with those, I believe all you do is go in, the judge makes sure that both sides are ready, and you take care of housekeeping stuff, so when the actual trial starts, you're not getting hung up with administrative stuff. So if he waives his preliminary, that would be interesting to me. I don't know. Sounds like he's just ready to go because he asked for a jury trial.
Exactly.
And, for me, I just have to wonder, is he that narcissistic and that sure of himself that he can convince a jury that he's not crazy or this didn't happen? We don't know what his defense is going to be. I assume they're going to say, oh, it was Alex.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to be really, really hard for them to convince a jury that he didn't do this to these kids' bodies.
Exactly. It's I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what his defense is.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know that We don't know what they have. Here's the thing, and I've always said, Chad knows every bit to this story. Now, what does law enforcement know? We don't know, but today his lawyer did file a discovery request with the courts and asked for a lot of stuff. So I'm going to go through these things right now, and we'll just see what they're asking for in regards to the case against Chad Daybell. They want any relevant written or recorded statements made by the defendant in the possession, custody, or control of the state. They want the substance of any relevant oral statement but made by the defendant, whether before or after arrest, to a peace officer, prosecuting attorney, or agent of the prosecuting attorney. Any kind of recorded testimony of the defendant before a grand jury. And then also any written or recorded statements of a co-defendant, if any. So that's interesting. I honestly don't know if that's a standard thing you put in here or if they are thinking there's a co-defendant. I would say there's a co-defendant. The question is going to be whether that co-defendant is alive or dead, meaning Alex or, perhaps Lori. Whether before or after arrest in response to interrogation by any person known by the co-defendant to be a peace officer or agent of the prosecuting agency. A copy of Chad's prior criminal record, if any. I don't think he has a criminal record. Documents and tangible objects. So they want copies of any books, papers, documents, photographs, tangible objects, building or places or copies or portions of them that are in the possession or control of the prosecuting attorney. So they're asking for, this is all kind of standard stuff, but sounds to me like they just want to see, obviously, like every defendant does, what does the other side have on him, and I guess we'll see. We just don't know a whole lot right now. They've kept this very tight-lipped, but we talked about the scope of this whole investigation away from the kids.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so much. You're looking at, I believe, Mesa Police in Arizona for the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux, which is Melanie Pulowski's ex-husband. You're looking at Charles Vallow's killing, which was at first kind of tucked away as self-defense, and wasn't until the kids went missing that was reopened. You're looking at Rexburg, and you're also looking at Tammy Daybell's autopsy, which still has not come in. I think we may hear something about that soon.
Yeah, I think so too. We talked about it. They know, we think they know the results of that autopsy.
Yeah, and I know they said a year because of toxicology, but the FBI is involved. I'm sure it takes them time when they don't know what kind, potentially, of a poison that they may be looking for. They have to run so many tests, and, on top of that, Tammy Daybell was embalmed and actually buried, and they excavated her on December 11th and had her body for about 7 or 8 hours, I believe. She was reburied later that day. But when she died, for those of you that are new to the case, this is Chad's wife who suddenly died, and no autopsy was performed at the request of Chad. And a lot of friends actually just recently said that the funeral felt very rushed. I don't even think there was a casket there. I believe I read there was no casket there, which is very odd. She has 5 children. They have 5 children together. And the friend just expressed that everything seemed very rushed. And then, of course, 2 weeks later, you find out Chad got married. So I'm sure everybody's radar that knew her was going off. We had talked, too, about a friend of Tammy Daybell's that spoke out this week after the remains of the children were found. And she had expressed that Tammy Daybell would give her a lot of book recommendations, and they would talk frequently, and Tammy was bubbly and smiley and just a very nice, pleasant person. But I think the last week or so before she died, her friend said that she wasn't her normal self. So what we were wondering is, we know through researching this case that at some point Charles Vallow, Lori Vallow's ex-husband who was shot and killed, was going to reach out to Tammy about their Chad and Lori's involvement together. So we don't know if maybe the week before she died, he got in touch with her. Did that happen? And did that caused Tammy to not act like her normal self. I think all that'll come out, but that is one of my biggest questions, I think. Did Tammy Daybell know before she died that Charles was worried Chad and Lori were having an affair? And if so, that could totally play into motive.
And the thing I think about and want to know, she was shot at on October 9th, and then she reports that, they investigate. We watched a neighbor talk and say, they went and helped look to see if the shooter was still there. So did that start the ball rolling? Wait a minute, something's going on. My husband's different,
Somebody just took a shot at me, and it's if you've seen the street view or the overhead view, I know the road is pretty heavily traveled from what we understand in front of Chad's house, but nothing like that ever happens in Rexburg, and it seemed so pinpointed that I'm sure that was a red flag. And she also mentioned she thought it was a paintball, and what we kind of think is maybe it was a silencer. And Brandon Boudreaux, I believe, also said that he thought he saw a silencer come out of the back of the Jeep. So it'll be interesting to see if they can prove that Alex had a silencer. Technically, if you have a silencer for a gun, you have to get a permit for that. It costs money, but criminals don't always follow the rule of law. So we're just not sure about that. In other news, this week, we're just going to go back to more recent times. There were some vigils held for Tylee and JJ. One was held at JJ's old school, and then there was another one where the community was able to come together and honor these two kids that we have worried about for months. We had talked about the emotions of getting involved in the case right when we started back up, and so many people were affected by this. And to have closure, it's not the ending you want, but at least now we know where the kids were, and so justice can take over. And we can hopefully put the people behind bars for the rest of their life who did this. And where do we go from here as far as charges? Well, it's going to depend on the autopsy. Hopefully they can determine a cause of death. I have a theory that maybe Tammy and Alex were poisoned if, in fact, they were killed. There was some concern about Tammy Daybell's daughter had expressed concern to a friend that there was pink foam coming out of her mouth, and we've done a lot of research on that, and it could be a lot of things. Poisoning is definitely one reason, but we've had nurses on the pages say it could come from a heart attack or a blood clot in the lungs. I think it would be very ironic if Tammy Daybell died of blood clots in the lungs like Alex did. I think that's going to be a red flag. And if, the thing too is if they find something on Tammy's autopsy, would they be able to go back and look at Alex's? I don't think so. I mean, they've ruled it natural, but remember, authorities said that they still have his case open. So the autopsy could have come back a natural death, but if they have digital evidence that links any of these guys to Alex's death, you still could see an additional murder charge come out of that.
Very true. Very true.
So it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out. But we were talking about all the different agencies and how massive this case is. And I think a lot of times as public trial watchers, we really want information that the authorities have when they get it. But, I don't think the arrests stop with Chad and Lori. I think we haven't seen the last of the arrests. And so they're still probably very limited on what they can share safely with us. I think the next thing we will learn is the cause of death for those kids and then see upgraded charges. I would say if it's not a difficult cause of death to establish, we could have that and upgraded charges maybe even this week.
Yeah, and here's what you don't want. You don't want the prosecution to play something out there and it interfere with the trial. We've been going through this since December. The families have been going through everything. So you don't want, even though we want to know, you don't want something to mess up something in the court.
Right, because it would be really sad if this all fell apart because of a technicality or somebody was tipped off to something that they're still investigating. We have no clue. And I don't think we will know the scope of the evidence that they have until they go to trial. I mean, I think we're going to be shocked when everything comes out. I don't think we have a clue right now of what they have. They are pouring through doorbell cams.
They released today talking about the storage footage.
Right. Yeah, the storage footage, apparently they have a lot more cameras than what we saw, and they were high definition, although the ones, that we saw, I was pretty shocked at the quality. They weren't that good, but is it a case where the storage shed comes in later? If you look at one of the aerial shots by the barn, which we know they were searching the barn because they had the evidence marker where they do the digital scanning of the crime scene, so we know that the barn was probably searched. And if you look outside the barn, there are numerous of those Tupperware tubs that we saw coming, I believe, out. Was it out of the storage locker or was it going in? They weren't there when the pictures were released. So is it a situation where they had evidence stored in there and brought back to the barn?
Yeah. Mikhail asked a good question. She says, wonder if they'll ever release the children's autopsies since the search warrant was sealed.
I don't know if they'll release copies of the autopsies, but if this goes to trial, that will all come in. And a cause of death would probably tell you what you needed to know as far as the cause. I mean, these are probably pretty healthy kids. I don't think any of them had any, I don't think JJ or Tally had any physical issues. So probably the biggest thing on that autopsy is just going to be that cause of death. And whether or not that's physical as far as an outward thing where violence was used, or could it be a situation where we're waiting on autopsy results for a while because they're having to test for 1,000 different poisons?
Yeah, and we talked about what the evidence, I can't imagine how much evidence that they're having to go through.
That has to be stored on a server somewhere. I mean, how many dozens or like hundreds of gigabytes is all the digital evidence in this case? I can't imagine.
Exactly. We talked a little bit about the townhomes.
Oh, yeah.
And all that. The garage, Alex didn't have anything in his townhome.
No, it was empty.
Yeah. We caught a glimpse of last night. We were watching Melanie Pulowski's interview with Nate. And we didn't catch it the first time we watched it. And when we were watching it last night, she says that when the FBI came and asked her who lived next door, she said something to the effect, my Aunt Lori goes over there, and my Uncle Alex goes over there.
Yeah, so they all had their own townhomes with nothing much in them, which is so weird. And she says, sometimes Lori goes over there. So we got to talking. Is this a situation where maybe the townhomes were sort of just there and they were staying somewhere else? Or it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, wording.
Why would you have townhomes that are not cheap? We looked up online. These townhomes go for $1,500, $1,600 a month. Why would you have it empty? And I know in Lori's townhome, there was a mattress on the ground for JJ, but there were no toys. And the other thing that we found out was that we did the math. Tylee only was in Rexburg about a week before she went missing.
Yeah, they talked to Colby and said they were moving the next day on August 30th. So, and then she was last seen on September 8th.
So that's 9 days. I mean, you're looking at 9 days she was in Rexburg. They knew what they were going to do before they got there, I think.
Yeah, and the neighbors testify that they only saw her one time.
Yeah, once they saw her. But I will say this, the Yellowstone picture, I will be very interested if it is a poisoning case. Tylee did not look herself in that photo. Now, I understand you're a week out from moving away, which Tylee, by the way, did not want to move. Did you hear that?
Yeah. She moved for JJ.
Right. So Tylee would have been very happy to stay in Arizona, but I think she obviously felt that she needed to be there for JJ. I think probably what she saw was her mom getting increasingly more unstable, And I don't think Tylee, from what we know about her and her love for JJ, I mean, I think she did what she felt she had to do, which unfortunately resulted in her death, most likely, one of many reasons. But, oh, man, it just breaks your heart when you hear things like this because they were just kids. I mean, Tylee's 17. That's still a kid. That's a baby.
Yes.
She had not even gotten started in life yet.
Yeah.
Very sad.
Mikkel asked, talking about the autopsy, it could be a while. It's taken Tammy's a long time. We honestly don't know how long they've had Tammy's autopsy back.
They keep saying that it's not completed. And in theory, they could be right because we were told up to a year, and that's just because we don't know. I mean, there are so many ways to poison somebody, and some of them aren't super obvious. I know somebody on one of the groups said Visine. I mean, don't do this if you're out there and you're mad, but apparently Visine eye drops, putting a drink can kill somebody. So it's just finding a needle in a haystack with poison.
Yeah.
There's no easy way to do it, and I guess that's what takes so long, but I tend to think they have Tammy's autopsy back. They've already punted this to the Attorney General.
Exactly. And we read an article online from a lady who worked in a different state and worked in the ME's office. And she said normally in their cases, when they didn't come out right and say we have, results, that they probably found something. So we don't know. I mean, that was what they do in their area. Right.
So it'll be interesting. I mean, Chad pleading not guilty doesn't surprise me. I wonder if it's a situation where what happens when Tammy's autopsy results come back and if, in fact, it is a homicide and he gets those charges. I mean, I don't think he could wiggle out of that one. He was the only one alone. He was in the house with her that night. But if you remember, law enforcement said months ago that they had evidence that may implicate Alex Cox in her death. So could it be a situation where they have digital evidence where they talk back and forth about what they're going to do? We don't know.
Yeah, and we go back to, from the very beginning, you like to use the term, because this is what the FBI said, we have a ring of foul play.
Right, and that speaks volumes to me, and they really haven't said anything else about that for months, but I think it was around maybe February when they said this. They indicated they had evidence that this was all connected, and I mean, who do you connect it to? Yeah, Alex probably had a big hand in it. He's not here. So you have Lori and Chad, and I really do think they probably are sitting in jail right now thinking, we're going to get off. Everybody's going to see.
Woodhouse Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram is bringing you more power, capability, and savings with the full lineup of new Ram trucks during the Black Friday sales event going on all month long. Lease a 2024 Ram 1500 Crew Cab Bighorn for $429 per month. Visit our 2 convenient Metro locations in Blair or Bellevue or online anytime. Lease for 42 months, 10,000 miles per year with approved credit. Tax, title, license extra. $2,500 down plus first payment and $299 doc fee to its signing. Example stock number BC230242. Offer expires 11/30/2023. See dealer for details.
The holidays start here at Baker's with a variety of options to celebrate traditions old and new. You could do a classic herb-roasted turkey or spice it up and make turkey tacos. Serve up a go-to shrimp cocktail or use Simple Truth wild-caught shrimp for your first Cajun risotto. Make creamy mac and cheese or a spinach artichoke fondue from our selection of Murray's cheese. No matter how you shop, Baker's has all the freshest ingredients to embrace all your holiday traditions. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
That we're exalted, we're higher beings or whatever. But what happens when they are apart longer than when they were together and they can't talk on the phone every day now? I'm sure they can talk to their attorneys. They're in the same office. But does it become a situation where maybe Lori's getting some kind of mental treatment in prison? Does that ease things for her? Does that ease things for Chad?
Yeah, and you got to remember they've talked every day for hours at a time. So now they're not talking at all.
Right, and so now it's radio silence. And does that help Lori? Because I have a very strong opinion. Lori, before Chad, was not completely mentally healthy. She never... she never could make a marriage work, and you can't be victim to everything. At some point, you have issues, and when you can't admit your mistakes in those marriages, then you're a narcissist and probably more. But it wasn't until Chad came along that all this started, really. Kay and Larry and Annie have all said that before Chad, she was a great mother, very active with her kids. And so does Lori start to get some mental health treatment possibly and see the light? It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, here's the question I have. If they believed what they were doing was right, why do you hide it? And why do you continue to lie about it and be deceitful if what you think you're doing is right?
Because they know it's wrong. My kids do it all the time. If I catch them in something and they try to weasel their way out of it, they'll use some clever words or just flat out deny things. But, you know, I think law enforcement's a lot like the mommies in the community as far as the investigators that see past the layer of deceit. And so this is not their first rodeo. The FBI is involved. They've seen it all. I mean, I think that you're not going to get much past them.
Yeah. We wanted to go back real quick and talk about Charles's phone. We know from body cam footage and all that there was discrepancies in Alex's testimony, Lori's testimony, Tylee's testimony, and, you know, thinking through it and looking, one of our theories is, you know, Lori said she had his phone and that's why Charles got upset. Our theory is nothing like that. We think, and just using our brain, we think she wanted to see what was on Charles's phone. And did she use his fingerprint to open that phone after he was shot? We just don't know.
Yeah. But what do you think they would be looking for on that? I mean, I can think of two things. What are your theories?
I would say they're looking to see if he contacted Tammy.
Yep.
Because that's a big thing. And what else he's told, the police or
her brother,
Brandon.
Did she try to get into his bank accounts or maybe his life insurance to see if she was the beneficiary? I mean, I don't think that was the reason, or if she might not have found it because she flipped out on Kay when she found out that Charles very smartly, shortly before he died, had changed the beneficiary from Lori to Kay because he assumed if something happened to him that Kay would end up raising JJ. And gosh, I wish that were the case, but...
Yeah, and you think in Melanie Gibbs' testimony, she said she wasn't sure she was going to get it. But she knew she was going to get some money, but she wasn't sure she was going to get the $1 million.
Right. And, the other thing, too, is we had talked about, for me, I think the biggest moment for me where I thought maybe the kids were alive, and we talked about this, and you pointed it out. I didn't see it this way until you said it, which is in the body cam footage where Tylee and Lori and Melanie Gibb went to the police station when Charles took her purse. And you watch Lori and Tylee, and you see that they are very fluid together. It's almost like a role reversal where Tylee was just putting her hand out, and Lori knew that meant calm down. And so after I saw that, I thought, I don't know. They've kind of grown up together in a sense. Tylee's been with her. Colby was out of the house at this point. Tylee's just kind of been through every marriage with her, and I didn't think Lori would be able to do something to her. I don't know that Lori actually participated in hurting her, but I think she knows. Because like we had said, well, if Chad and Alex said, hey, look, the kids were in danger, we sent them off somewhere, well, I mean, why is she not looking for them?
Yeah, that's the big thing. And I think the private investigator, I forget his name, but he's the one who mentioned that if she wasn't involved, why didn't you report your kids missing? Right.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, why is she in Hawaii on the beach with, Chad playing the ukulele after their, we don't even know if it was a real marriage. But, I mean, unfortunately we know now that Tylee's not here. Do you really, my opinion, Fruit Loop, is I think Tylee just knew too much about Charles's death.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people's, opinions and theories is she just knew too much.
Yeah.
And we talked about it. One of the reasons why I thought that they would possibly be alive was Lori's hatred to Kay and Larry.
Yeah.
I really, death is a finality. It's final. And I thought she could hold that over her head. And we talked about that. And that's how I convinced you to think, they're possibly alive.
Right.
That was some of it, was she can kind of, say, I know where they are and you don't.
Right. And I think that I don't think Kay and Larry, the situation with them had anything to do with why Tally died. I think this all goes back maybe to Charles. Could be in combination with the fact that Annie has said frequently that Tally knew right from wrong. She was headstrong. She had spent some time with her after Tally's dad, which is Annie's brother, had passed away, and she felt like she was making some progress with her. She saw the tension between Lori and her mom, and that was before Charles was shot and killed. So you can only imagine at that point, if there's tension, well, what if Tally saw something where they put it over her head, we're going to go to prison if you don't lie for us. And then Tally maybe is in a situation where she's right and wrong. What do I do? What do I do? Is it a situation where she saw right through Chad and saw what he was doing to her mom, and then to Chad, she was a threat that needed to be gone? There's so many ways you could look at this, and we're just not good. We may never know. They are not required to tell us their motive unless they have it in digital format. If they have digital evidence, we may find out. But if it lies just within Chad and Lori, we may never know why. What was the reason these kids had to die?
Yeah, and it's baffling. And you feel bad. We want to talk a little bit about Chad's kids because they're going through a lot just like everybody else. Kay and Larry and Annie and everybody involved. Colby, and we're going to talk about him in a minute. But, they're going through a ton of stuff. And honestly, these kids, right now, they didn't have anything to do with it that we know of.
Right. And I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but at the end of the day, these kids have been raised in this. And so when you're raised in something, it's not like you can turn it off. So if they were raised to believe this religion that Chad created is the way it goes, they're I still see it in Melanie Gibbs. She's still got what I call residual cult effects. I mean, you can see she's not completely free from it. So, and then on top of it, their mom had just died. There's all this stuff surrounding them. They don't know which way to go. So we're not going to join the bandwagon of bashing these kids. Our hearts go out to them, I think, until it's proven otherwise. They're victims as well.
Yeah, and I go back to Larry when he was standing out, on the side of the road.
Yeah.
And he said, I want to be a peacemaker.
Right.
And, I think that's huge. This community is just seems to be a loving community.
Oh, yeah.
And just reaching out. And I know that one of the neighbors who actually, the area that he lives in is called like Price Corner, where all those houses are. And he shared on his interview that they're going to get through it together, that they want to help them get through it. And it does nothing to reach out and bash those kids because they didn't do anything wrong. That's their dad. I don't know anybody who wouldn't defend your father, until you hear all the evidence. Mm-hmm. And I know Emma's little thing she did at the beginning, that was early on in the case, and they really didn't know what was going on totally. And
right.
It's hard to hear somebody tell you what your dad's done.
Right, and I think too, it seems obvious Emma's a daddy's girl, and so she's just lost her mother. We have no indication these kids are involved in any way. So I just wanted we both had talked about this earlier. We wanted to make sure that we put out there, we are not going to hate on these kids, and we're not going to theorize that anybody was involved until the law enforcement, if they ever do, puts that out there. It's just, to me, like Colby right now, they're victims. They essentially lost both of their parents.
Exactly. And Emma's a school teacher. She loves kids, obviously. Mm-hmm.
It could be just a nervous reaction. If you're a school teacher and your dad's suspected of something like this, how do you act? I don't know how I would act. I can think I would be respectful and plead for information to come out, but until you're in that situation, you don't know.
Yeah, and you're going to defend. I would defend my parents until the whole story comes out and I know the truth. And that's the big thing here is truth. We all want to know the truth. We want to get justice for Tammy and Charles and Tylee and JJ, and see see this through to the end.
Yeah, it's going to be a long road, though, Fruit Loop. I don't see this going to trial for a few years. And then there's always the possibility, some time apart, some mental health counseling. Do they break? And finally, I think they know what they've done. They're just clouded with a cult thing right now and this complex. But does somebody break in the end and rat on the other or plead guilty? I don't know. I mean, right now, I would say I don't see it happening, but these aren't seasoned criminals. They've never done hard time. They've never been in jail, as far as we know. So this is, it just depends on at what point can they keep this up.
Yeah, and everybody needs healing.
Right.
All families involved. This has destroyed, a lot of families. And you hope, for Brandon and them's sake, they get healing there. I mean, those are, precious kids. I can't imagine what he's going through, dealing with all that situation.
Right. It's crazy. Just there's so much going on. And speaking of Colby, we said we were going to talk about him. He did make the trip to Rexburg and left a sign out on the fence. It was very sweet, just talking about how much he loved him. And then he has a private Instagram, but it was shared online that he had made a very heartfelt post about his brother and his sister. And gosh, Colby just breaks my heart. Out of everybody, he's lost his mom and his siblings. I mean, he's lost everything. Yeah. Not everything, but he's lost the family that he had before his wife and kid.
You think of Charles.
And Charles, exactly, because I don't know how his relationship was with Charles. It seemed good that he had his wedding there, had his gender reveal there. So
they live there?
Right. So we don't know for sure about the relationship with Charles, but it seems very positive. He seems like Kay and Larry have already kind of scooped him up and put him under their protective wing, and I love seeing that. This is the son of the woman who is probably responsible for JJ dying, but they are big enough to see that's not Colby. That's not Colby's fault, and Colby needs them right now.
Yeah. Larry and Kay, I think they're so cool and just loving people that are reaching out. I mean, Larry said more than once, if you ever come through Louisiana, you better stop.
Right, yeah.
Because they've just grown to love people. And it's just strangers who have, taken an interest in this case and wanted to see, we all wanted to see him alive and wanted justice and everything. So,
yeah, it's just, it's a sad ending for sure, but justice, hopefully will prevail and we'll find out what really happened. I don't think we'll ever get a full story. But we were talking about Melanie. Speaking of Melanie, I just immediately thought of Janice Cox. And one thing that came out this week that we read was, if you remember, Janice Cox was interviewed by, was not Nate, it was somebody in Arizona, I believe?
It was the Lowe guy, Morgan Lowe.
Okay. So he's the one that did the interview with Janice and Summer Cox. I don't know if her last name is Cox still. But so we found out that after that interview aired, if you remember in the interview, Janice said that she had talked to JJ on, I believe, October the 1st.
Yes.
And she showed her phone bill with that number, and I think it was a 90-minute call.
97 minutes, I think it was.
It was long. So after that interview, guess what happens to Janice?
What?
They come knocking with a search warrant.
Oh.
So what else has Janice lied about? Because we don't know the date JJ was killed. September 28th was the last day that he was seen alive. Now, could it be that they left and went somewhere and had him alive till October 1st? It's possible, but it was enough to pique the interest of law enforcement to serve her with a search warrant. I just don't find them credible at all.
Yeah, what was in that search warrant?
Oh, yeah. What were they looking for? Because how can you be talking to a kid who presumably passed on or around September 28th? I don't know. We don't know what they were looking for. I don't think that search warrant's been put out either. It could be a situation where right now none of these search warrants are going to be made public. And then, we were talking about the scope of this investigation, and you're looking at the FBI. You're looking at Fremont County, where Tammy Daybell died, Rexburg, where the kids disappeared and ultimately were found in Rexburg. Or is it Salem? Mm-hmm. Or Salem, which I guess is, that's Rexburg's territory. And Can you imagine the digital evidence they have to try to find, such as the ring cams, going and seeing if neighbors had ring cam footage available? Was that retrievable from the week that Tylee was there? Did they ever see Tylee going in and out of that townhouse more than once or so? And the other thing that I thought about too was she had rented this storage building, but yet all 3 townhomes had garages that were attached where you could leave out what looked like the kitchen and be in that garage. Why would you rent a storage shed?
It makes no sense to pay extra money. And what they had in there.
Yeah, it was just, it was just kid stuff, but and pictures. But why wouldn't you just leave that in the because she left his toys on the front step when they finally did leave. Yeah,
it makes no sense whatsoever.
I think we're going to find that storage shed comes in a much bigger way maybe in this trial. Is that somewhere they stored something relating to the kid's death, remains or whatever else? I know that I don't know if they had ever said they had sent the cadaver dog in there. So, we assume they didn't find anything in there. We don't know, though. They could have been building this where they had a hit on that storage unit for months. And then the search warrant from last week is just a cumulative thing. That's the end of months of, it's going to be, I'm so wanting to know what all they had on them. It's interesting. But the other thing, too, we were talking about is the marriage situation. So if you think about it, Chad and Lori married 2 weeks after Tammy Daybell died. Melanie, I want to say Boudreaux, but Pulowski, marries her husband after, 10 days?
Yeah, they knew each other 10 days when they got married.
Does it seem like this cult centers around being paired with somebody, and once you've met them, I know Chad and Lori had known each other, but it seems like Alex and Zulema, all these marriages happened around the same time. It's just very odd to me.
Yeah, and we talked about it being like-minded people.
Yeah, I don't think, I'm curious to know whether or not Ian is in this cult. Because I can't figure out why all of a sudden he was working with the FBI and then very quickly was against the FBI and just echoing Melanie's statement of, it's all a big misunderstanding. The media has, made this worse. Well, I don't really know how. I mean, we just found bodies.
Yeah, and I can't, the document that he said on the interview that he typed up for her attorneys didn't read like that. It read more like a journal. Mm-hmm. If you go back and read it, the way it's written, to me, it reads more like a journal than, like he's saying.
Right, like he's going to present that to a lawyer or something. And the other thing that we were talking about, too, was I don't know, we were talking about the townhomes, and kind of back to that for a second. We just kind of feel like maybe that was sort of staged. Like that was just a residence. Although, if you remember, Kay did not know their address until she went into Charles's Amazon account and found the Rexburg address when Lori had bought the wedding ring. So why would they? I can't figure out why they would need these townhomes. I guess maybe it was just a short thing. If they knew they were going to kill the kids and bury them on Chad's property, they just needed to be in Rexburg for that. I don't know, because at that point, Tammy was still alive.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. And we talked about it before. It makes no sense whatsoever.
None. I mean, because I was, even though I kind of knew the dates, I was kind of shocked today when we figured out it was, 8 or 9 days when they were in Rexburg and when Tylee went missing. So it just seems to me like the townhomes was a place to just throw a mattress on the ground until you do what you came there to do. But why would Melanie move up and then Chad and Lori are gone to Hawaii? It just doesn't make. That's why I think Ian was part of the plan well before the 10 days that they met, or so they say.
And you think, where was Tylee when Melanie's there, Melanie Pulowski, when she's there visiting, she doesn't see her.
Neither does Melanie.
Melanie Gibb doesn't see her.
Right.
Yeah,
I would like to know where Tylee was for those 8 days. I think it was out there that somebody saw, like we said earlier, somebody saw her go in once.
Yeah, they saw her one time.
I mean, could it be a situation where she just stayed in the house for a week? I mean, maybe, but I don't see a 17-year-old with a driver's license staying in a house for a week in a new town.
Yeah.
You had all this time too, though, where you've got Lori out with Chad at walking the track. I'm curious. We need to look at our dates and see when they said they walked the track. Was that before or after the kids went missing?
We would have to look that up.
Yeah, we'll have to look that up and see. I'm curious now to kind of get these dates in a row. And when did Melanie Gibb go? We'll try to research that and get a little timeline for you on the next podcast. I think what we're going to do, and we talked about this with this little blip we had, we think it may be good for us to record these podcasts, kind of polish them up, make them sound a lot better. And that way, if we have something like what happened an hour ago happen, you guys never know it. So what we might do is on our Facebook page or Twitter page or both, the morning that we're going to do the podcast, we may put out there if you have anything you want us to cover or talk about, put it in the comments. We like doing the live chat, but I think earlier when we're running, my house where my Wi-Fi is slam across the house from where we had set up the new studio, and it's not a short distance, so we were kind of scrambling to find out what happened, and we just don't want that. So if you like the live podcast, let us know on Twitter or Facebook. But I think right now we're thinking maybe we're going to start recording these as well as doing some YouTube videos. Tell us about those, Fruit Loop.
Yeah, we want to try to put some of those together to give you some information where you can see it, and then have some links there that you can click on to just liven it up a little bit so you can see what we're talking about.
Right, so we're just going to kind of do voiceover videos with pictures and information. We would like to do one from the beginning, everything we know for newcomers, because what happens with trials like this is you have people like us who have kind of been here since the beginning, and then you have people who join these groups as soon as the big news hits, such as the remains being found, and they'll follow that trial until, it goes to court. But we're going to kind of make a big video of a timeline, and then eventually we'll just kind of do some news updates on video format as well as the continued podcast. But the one thing we were talking about earlier today, and right now, I expect there'll be a good bit of information coming, kind of trickling out for a while. And we plan on just pretty much keeping this podcast to Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow right now. But in the future, if there are any trials you want us to research and start talking about maybe in a few months, let us know on Facebook or Twitter. I'm thinking about the Roden murders. I believe it was Ohio, 8 family members killed in one night. It ended up being what they think is a custody battle, but now they've arrested a family of 4 with the father of the child being in that family. Brutal killings, literally took out an entire family. There are maybe 2 or 3 immediate relatives alive. The youngest victim was 16, I believe. They even, the mother of this young man's child had just had a baby 4 days earlier. They shot her while she was in the bed with the child, but left the children that were in each of these houses were left alive. It's a fascinating case. Again, they're very tight-lipped on the evidence and what they found so far. So, but if there are any other trials or missing person cases out there, because what will happen is eventually, the further away we get from last week's events, information is going to be, at one point, it will come to a standstill almost. And if this trial isn't heard for 2 to 3 years, it's going to be dry for a very long time. So we're going to have to pick something else up, or otherwise we just sit here and theorize about things we don't know about. So just think about any trials you're interested in. Let us know, because we know at some point we will have to shift gears until we get closer to trial with this.
Yep, exactly. So thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, sorry we had this problem. It really kind of cut into our flow. We were all ready to go with our whiteboard and our topics, and we had to run to another part of my house to set everything back up just to get back on tonight. And I think it messed up our mojo a tad. But I think we talked about, one other thing that I wanted to talk about. People were talking about actual charges for Chad. We just don't know. We assume the manner of death will be homicide, but the concern for me, obviously, is tying Chad to the actual killings. But I did look up today possible charges if it's not going to be murder. Like if he wasn't there, the accessory charges after the fact could be 30 years per charge. So I know a lot of people are worried they're going to have a hard time tying him to the murders. I don't know that they will. I think there's probably so much evidence in the ether out there that you don't have to have a direct link, but you've got little pieces that you can make a big picture. But in the event they even charge him with accessory to murder, That's 60 years for both counts. So I don't think Chad or Lori is ever going to be free.
Yeah, me either.
And they shouldn't be. Look at all the pain they've caused. But all right, guys, we're going to head out. And thanks for listening in. We're going to come back maybe later this week. I don't think we'll be back on unless we have a cause of death or upgraded charges or something big comes out. Right now, we're just waiting on more news. But you guys have a great night. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And we'll tweet out any news articles as they come across to us and keep you informed. All right, you guys have a good night.
Bye.
The holidays start here at Baker's with a variety of options to celebrate traditions old and new. You could do a classic herb roasted turkey or spice it up and make turkey tacos. Serve up a go-to shrimp cocktail or use Simple Truth wild-caught shrimp for your first Cajun risotto. Make creamy mac and cheese or a spinach artichoke fondue from our selection of Murray's cheese. No matter how you shop, Baker's has all the freshest ingredients to embrace all your holiday traditions. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
We can stop HIV, Iowa.
Getting tested for HIV and knowing your status is key.
The CDC recommends everyone get tested for HIV at least once in their lifetime, or more often when needed.
Visit stophiv.iowa.org.